Hi, this is Aaron Wilson. We're talking about Texans Pro Bowl running back Joe Mixon. I've got a lot of questions about Joe because he didn't participate in the organized team activities in minicamp. And I want to recap and kind of tell you why there's not a cause for concern with Joe in terms of his availability for training camp and the season, barring any setbacks, obviously. So with Joe, last year, a couple of times, he was hip drop tackled, and that's an illegal tackle, and it wasn't necessarily flagged at the time, but they were fined, so they were deemed illegal tackles by the NFL. But the result of those tackles took a toll on his ankle, so it caused some high ankle issues. And you saw Joe after that Bears game, after the tackle from the Bears, that he missed some time. So he missed the Vikings game, and they lost. And then he was out for the Jaguars game, and he was out for the Buffalo game. And then he came back, and he played for the remainder of the season. His first game back against the Patriots, rushed for 102 yards. And so Joe made the Pro Bowl and was outstanding throughout the season, adding an edge, adding a physical presence, a downhill running style that they'd been really looking for. And I think Joe is just so pivotal to this football team. And on and off the field, he was voted a team captain and wound up replacing Stephon Diggs as captain once Stephon was out for the year. But to me, Joe was a leader, captaincy or not, all year long, and was outstanding with the media. We gave him the Media Good Guy Award, and that award goes for professionalism and also just being interesting and giving you a good interview. What do we consider interesting? Like good quotes, good insight, and being willing to talk. And he would talk before games and after, whether they won or lost. And I thought that, Joe just had a great first season. That was why I considered him to be one of Nick Caserio's best investments, that 3-year, $27 million extension. And now they're going to have him work in tandem with Nick Chubb. But going back to the health element, because, that's the, kind of the really the missing ingredient at times for Joe because of the ankle. So, yes, he did aggravate ankle and foot deal here in the offseason. He was in a walking boot at one point, per sources. He is out of the boot, and he was wearing a lace-up brace during his youth football camp that they held at the Methodist Training Center. Since then, Joe has made major strides, and Joe has regained his mobility, and I expect him to be ready, if it's not for the first day of training camp, early in training camp. I'll be surprised, barring some unexpected issue, setback in training perhaps, that Joe would have an issue. But got hurt working away from the Texans on his own, and it wasn't anything, he didn't have surgery or anything like that. But Joe has had some ankle issues, and that's one of the reasons why they decided to sign Nick Chubb. But looking at what Joe did, even after all of the ankle injuries, and he had a little setback against the Miami Dolphins, he winds up rushing for 194 yards in the 2 playoff games. So he was absolutely vital to what they did. And he also caught an additional 3 passes for 25 yards. So he goes for 106 yards against the Los Angeles Chargers. And he runs for 88 yards and 18 carries against the Chiefs. And if that game had been closer, I think he would have gotten the ball even more. He was right there on the verge of another 100-yard game. So, Joe has definite staying power. He's a strong runner, punishing runner at times, and has a lot of will. Just needs some blocking. There was no blocking in that Detroit game, and that was a frustrating night for the Texans. And hopefully the run blocking is more consistent than it was on that night. That was definitely a step in the wrong direction. But he gets 46 yards, 25 carries, and he was being hit almost as soon as he got the football, and that can't happen. And then he comes back the next week against the Dallas Cowboys, and I thought really showcased the breakaway running ability, the speed for a guy that's almost 230 pounds and tall, a ability to run behind his pads, and be an angry runner. And to me, Joe Mixon, total package, exactly what you want as a lead back. And to have a 1-2 punch of Joe and Nick Chubb, I don't think we can really emphasize it enough how much that can help the entire offense for a rookie offense coordinator, Nick Caley. Hey, when in doubt, run the football. And I can tell you this, Caley wants to run the football. And the offensive line, they're fired up. They want to run the ball. They want to block for Joe. They love blocking for Joe. Joe is incredibly well respected inside and outside that locker room. People look to Joe as the real deal, authentic, legit, any word you want to attach to Joe. Because Joe has a lot of credibility, and it's not just who Joe is on the football field, it's the type of character. Joe has matured considerably, put the past behind him, had some off-field issues, well documented at Oklahoma. Has grown a lot from those, and I think what you see from Joe is a guy that's really dedicated to football and dedicated to the process and getting his rest in, taking care of himself. And all football players get dinged. That is part of the game. It's a 100% injury rate in football. But yeah, I'm here today to say Joe Mixon is on track, doing well. I don't know what their plan is because they're not going to tell me, are we going to throw him out there the first day? What's he going to do? I don't know. I think they have to see, this a little bit. This is an element of to be determined, a bit of an X factor because they have to just see how Joe looks when Joe shows up. I don't care. I mean, he missed time last year during training camp. And what did he do after missing time in camp? I know there's some anxiety about this from some fans and press. He ran for 159 yards on 30 carries. And, he was getting in the end zone against the Colts. That was the season opener. That was his season high for rushing. And I think he's certainly capable of doing that again. You look at Joe and Chubb, and two guys coming from the AFC North, and you heard from Chubb before during the mini camp after he signed his 1 year up to $5 million deal. Can't wait to team up with Joe. This is tough guys. This is AFC North, Browns, former Bengals, coming to the South, the AFC South, and teaming up to form a vibrant backfield. So if you're Kaylee and offensive line coach and run game coordinator Cole Popovich, think about this. You can have a truly downhill, physical, running type of game. You can really do things with play action. You have to respect the play action fake to Joe Mixon and to Nick Chubb. So this adds a new element to the offense, a smash mouth element, if you will, to how these guys can impose their will, burn clock, keep the defense fresh, and also get yards and sometimes score touchdowns, not just in the red zone. Both these backs are fast enough to take it the distance. And I look at some of the things that you can do with a Joe Mixon in terms of long runs, in terms of, I think he's really wasn't thrown to enough last season. But that can change. They can get him the ball more. And to me, he's about 6'1", 220 pounds of bad news for defenses. So if you're a linebacker and you're there in your 2-point stance and you look in the backfield and you can tell that Mixon's about to get the ball, that's not fun. Joe is as big as a lot of the linebackers because they're smaller nowadays. They're not a lot of 240, 250-pound linebackers, and he's certainly faster. So I think you have with Joe and Chubb are two guys that can carry the mail and be that bell cow for this offense. So I like what they did by having Chubb, but let's not forget about Mixon. And just because someone doesn't practice in the spring doesn't mean that they won't be ready for the fall. So I've watched even some videos, and you guys probably saw them as well. Things he's been doing in training in terms of ankle flexion, in terms of increased mobility, and definitely paying the price in the weight room. So yeah, Joe Mixon, expect him to be ready at some point, probably even early during training camp. I just can't sit here today and say, it's first day. Guess what? That doesn't matter. What matters is the first game against the Los Angeles Rams at SoFi Stadium. And I expect Joe Mixon to be out there carrying the football along with Nick Chubb. And I can't predict the future. I have no idea if somebody's going to turn their ankle in practice, that kind of thing. I can't predict injuries. The only thing I can say is Joe is on the right path. I'm not concerned about Joe, and I think that he'll be fine. Let's change the topic now, and let's discuss a few other things in terms of the Texans. And actually, I think only one of these. I want to do a Greenbrier video, but I want to talk about C.J. Stroud, and this is something that he did. This is off the field, and I thought he did something really great. And this was a thing with a church camp where CJ, he is paying for 7 children from Space City Church to go to church camp, and they are incredibly grateful. And I had a chance to talk to the pastor from their church, and it was great to talk to Vaughn Walwin, also known as Pastor Von Wan. It's just a lot easier to say than his given name, Vaughn Walwin. But Von Wan, who spoke to the Texans last year, and CJ credited with giving him poise and calm with his message of you got to make it through the mud to get to the miracle. Just the adversity of life that you go through. Everybody goes through adversity, what kind of faith you have. This is mostly about people, and it's an intangible thing. And for CJ, who's deeply religious, very spiritual young man, this resonated with him. So when they reached out to the CJ Stroud Foundation, to CJ's mom, Kimberly, and CJ, he agreed to provide the resources for them to go to this church camp in Waxahachie. So this means a lot, and you saw the kids in the video saying, thank you, CJ Stroud, collectively, and just really a nice thing that CJ did, and not something that he sought attention for. This is something where the church made an announcement, and I got a chance to have a great conversation with the pastor, and he said, being a sports guy, to have meet D'Amico Ryans to describe C.J. Stroud sitting close to the front of the room during his sermon, taking notes with a pen and paper, writing things down, and telling him afterward that he did a great job. He was invited by Mikado Henson, the Texans team chaplain, and then he got the shout out. So for him to hear that, especially here in Texas from the star quarterback, that just meant a lot for him. And he called CJ a powerful ambassador of Christian faith and values. And he says, we're always looking for a champion. It's rare that you have an athlete on fire talking about Jesus. So yeah, we'll talk a little about religion today, and that's okay too. We can sometimes talk about the players, because that is, a lot of times you'll hear, well, what about the players' interests and things like that, or they talk about the video games, things like that. Well, yeah, CJ likes to talk about his faith at times. So this is part of who CJ Stroud is. It's not just the great quarterback or someone that can also play basketball or that does lots of other things and has famous friends like the Tom Brady's and the Michael Rubins, but there's also CJ the philanthropist through the CJ Stroud Foundation. So yeah, they are helping the Space City Church, and I just wanted to give CJ a shout out and let people know. And it was an article I wrote about. I encourage you to read it if you want to know more about CJ Stroud and this at www.click2houston.com. Headline is How Texans CJ Stroud Helped Children from Space City Church Attend a Church Camp in Waxahachie. And the quote, it means the world. So that is from Pastor Von Wan, who was proud to give a sermon to the Texans. And they do this where they have some guest speakers speak to the team, and they like to hear different messages, and this is something that just means a lot to the guys. And so that's like a lot of football teams. There are a lot of guys that are really expressive in their faith, and so CJ is one of them, and is part of, for me, covering CJ Stroud, because we don't want just to tell you, he passed for 3 touchdowns and he used to make this much money. This is about CJ the person. So not necessarily connected to football, but connected to the person. CJ Stroud in the community, helping the Space City Church. So that's cool. And I'm going to have some other videos. I definitely want to get a little more into the benefits of the West Virginia trip and the joint practices. So I think it's enough to do. Let's do a separate video on that, guys. And look forward to talking to you. Thanks for coming to my live. I appreciate it. It was my second one, and just getting better with it and enjoying that. It's fun to answer your questions in real time. So that was a lot of fun. And then, of course, we have a video on the Daniil Hunter, Will Anderson Jr. Are they the best edge tandem? In my opinion, they are, and I make the case for that in a separate video. And then we had a recent video with the folks from the UFL, Daryl Moose Johnston, and Roughnecks player Leon O'Neal Jr. talking about Damon Arnett Jr. and why they have confidence in him that he's going to stay on the straight and narrow path and be an asset to the Texans. And he obviously has a significant history of off-field issues, but they feel good about him and his commitment that he has truly changed and reordered his life. So yeah, please check out some of these other recent videos here on my channel. And guys, thanks. We're up to about 9,500 subscribers, looking to get to 10,000 as soon as possible, and to continue to bring you content that you can find nowhere else but here. And of course, I'm also on Twitter and X at @AaronWilson_NFL, Instagram AaronWilson7128. I'll be on Sports Sunday tonight with Randy McElvoy at KPRC2. Please tune in. And I'm, of course, writing for www.click2houston.com as their Texans insider and reporter. And you can find all of that for free. And yeah, please bookmark our page. Check us out. We'll keep it coming with new content as we count down to training camp. Guys, thanks so much for your time. Look forward to our next conversation.